The sound of a myth dying is not a roar, but a silence. On April 6, 2014, inside the cavernous Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans, over 75,000 people fell silent at the exact same moment. It was a collective, cavernous void, a vacuum created by the sudden, violent death of a belief. In the center of the ring, Brock Lesnar, a mountain of muscle and menace, was slowly rising to his feet. His face, usually a mask of predatory rage, was flushed with a primal, almost surprised elation. His advocate and mouthpiece, Paul Heyman, was at ringside, his own expression a perfect mirror of the audience's disbelief, his mouth agape, his eyes wide with a shock that seemed utterly genuine. But it was the man on the mat that held the world's attention. The Undertaker, the Phenom, the conscience of the WWE, lay defeated. More than defeated, he was mortal. The giant screens flanking the WrestleMania 30 stage, which moments before had been a riot of fire and lightning, now displayed a stark, funereal graphic. It read simply, 21-1. The streak was over. For 21 consecutive years, The Undertaker's victory at WrestleMania was the one constant in the chaotic universe of professional wrestling. It was more than a statistic. It was a pillar of the entire WWE edifice, a modern myth that fans had come to accept as an unassailable truth. It wasn't a question of if The Undertaker would win, but how. Legends had tried and failed. Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Ric Flair, CM Punk, all had been consumed by the legend. And then came Brock Lesnar. And then came the silence. That silence was the first step onto a slippery slope, a path WWE's chairman, Vince McMahon, chose to take with eyes wide open. It was a calculated, seismic decision to sacrifice the company's most sacred myth for the sake of one man. The goal was to create an unstoppable monster, a final boss so credible, so terrifying, that he could carry the company into a new era of mainstream legitimacy. They succeeded. But slopes, by their nature, only go one way: down. And the cost of creating that monster, of feeding him legacies and championships and bending every rule to accommodate him, would lead WWE down a treacherous path that would take years to reveal its dark, unforeseen destination. This is the story of that choice and its long, complicated, and dangerous fallout. To understand the gamble, one must first understand the weapon. Brock Lesnar was never just a professional wrestler. He was a biological anomaly, a genetic freak who seemed purpose-built for combat. When he first debuted in WWE in 2002, he was dubbed the next big thing, a moniker that felt like an understatement. He moved with the explosive grace of a jungle cat trapped in the body of a grizzly bear. An NCAA Division III heavyweight wrestling champion, his athletic credentials were unimpeachable. He became the youngest WWE champion in history at 25, not because of a carefully crafted storyline, but because it was the only believable outcome. He was simply better, stronger, and more real than anyone else. But his first tenure was short-lived. Lesnar, an intensely private man who despised the grueling travel and public demands of a WWE superstar, walked away in 2004. He tried his hand at the NFL, and when that didn't pan out, he did the unthinkable. He transitioned to the brutal, unforgiving world of mixed martial arts. This was the move that transformed him from a wrestling phenom into a global icon of combat. In the Ultimate Fighting Championship, UFC, there were no predetermined outcomes. The blood was real, the knockouts were real, and the danger was absolute. And Brock Lesnar, the kid from a dairy farm in South Dakota, conquered it. In 2008, in only his fourth professional fight, he became the UFC heavyweight champion. He wasn't just playing a tough guy on TV anymore. He was the certified baddest man on the planet. His pay-per-views shattered UFC records. He was a mainstream draw, a name that transcended the wrestling bubble and brought with him an aura of terrifying legitimacy. When a severe bout of diverticulitis cut his MMA career short, he returned to WWE in 2012. This was not the same Brock Lesnar who had left 8 years prior. This was a conquering hero from a more real sport, a man who didn't need WWE. WWE needed him, and both parties knew it. His new contract was revolutionary. He would work a drastically reduced schedule, appearing only for major events. He wouldn't be a touring superstar. He would be a special attraction, a final boss who would descend from his mountain fortress in Saskatchewan to lay waste to the heroes of the day. And to speak for him, to fill the narrative gaps left by his absence, he had Paul Heyman. Heyman, a creative genius in his own right, was the perfect counterpoint to Lesnar's silent menace. He was the prophet for the god of violence. With every sermon-like promo, Heyman built the cult of Brock. He didn't just hype a match. He sold an impending apocalypse. He called his client the Beast Incarnate, the Conqueror, the One in 21-1. That last moniker, the one that would define Lesnar's second run, was born from that single fateful decision at WrestleMania 30. The call to end the streak was Vince McMahon's alone. Reports from backstage described a chairman obsessed with the idea. In his mind, the streak had become so powerful that its eventual end had to mean something monumental. It couldn't be used to elevate a promising young star nobody would believe. It had to be conquered by someone who already felt bigger than the myth itself. In McMahon's eyes, only one man had the credibility: the former UFC heavyweight champion. It was a transaction. WWE would give Lesnar its most valuable narrative asset, and in return, Lesnar would become the company's ultimate narrative weapon. Many within the company, including The Undertaker's fellow wrestlers, were reportedly furious. They saw it as a betrayal, a waste of a powerful storytelling tool on a part-time star who didn't need the accolade. But the decision was made. On that night in New Orleans, after a clunky, uncomfortable match where The Undertaker suffered a severe concussion, the referee's hand slapped the mat for a third time. The bell rang, and 75,000 people went silent. The slope had been chosen. The first, most obvious consequence of this decision was the creation of an almost unbeatable character. Having conquered the streak, Lesnar was booked as a force beyond comprehension. This was cemented at SummerSlam later that year, when he challenged John Cena for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. Cena was the company's top star, its tireless hero. Their match was not a contest, it was a demolition. Lesnar delivered 16 German suplexes, tossing the 250-pound Cena around the ring like a child's toy. He barely broke a sweat. The term Suplex City was born, a grim, repetitive brand of dominance that would define Lesnar's matches for years to come. He won the championship, and with it, the era of the absent king began. For the next several years, WWE's top prize was, for all intents and purposes, a part-time trophy. Lesnar would disappear for months on end, taking the championship with him to his home in Canada. This created a massive creative black hole at the top of the card. How do you build storylines for a title that isn't there? How do you create new main event stars when the final boss is perpetually unavailable? The full-time roster worked tirelessly, putting on incredible matches on weekly television and secondary pay-per-views. But it all felt like an undercard. The real story, the one that truly mattered, was on hold until Brock decided to show up. His appearances were treated as monumental events, and his title defenses felt like legitimate super fights. In that sense, the strategy worked. It made the championship feel special, but it came at the expense of the entire ecosystem. The slope was getting steeper. Opponents who stepped up to face him were fed into the Suplex City wood chipper. Talented stars like Dean Ambrose and Samoa Joe were booked to look utterly helpless against him. The matches became formulaic. Bell rings, opponent gets a brief flurry of offense, Lesnar shrugs it off. Suplex, suplex, F5, pinfall. It was a brilliant strategy for protecting a star who was aging and had a history of health issues, minimizing his risk while maximizing his aura. But it offered little to his opponents, who were often left looking weaker than when they started. Roman Reigns was the chosen one, the man McMahon wanted to build as the next top star by conquering the Conqueror. But the audience rejected him, in part because his ascent felt so manufactured in the shadow of the legitimately terrifying Lesnar. The slope became more treacherous in 2016. While still under contract with WWE, Lesnar made a one-off return to the octagon for the landmark UFC 200 event. WWE promoted his fight, blurring the lines between sports entertainment and legitimate combat sports more than ever before. Lesnar won the fight decisively. It was a triumph for him and by extension for WWE. Then, the news broke. Lesnar had failed 2 drug tests administered by the United States Anti-Doping Agency, USADA, in relation to the fight. He had tested positive for a banned substance. In the world of legitimate sports, this was a major scandal. His victory was overturned to a no contest, and he was suspended from MMA competition. Here, the slippery slope presented WWE with a moral crossroads. Their top star, the man whose legitimacy they had built their entire main event scene around, had been exposed as a cheat in that very arena of legitimacy. The company's response was telling. There was almost no response at all. There was no suspension, no fine, no public condemnation. He was scheduled to face Randy Orton at SummerSlam shortly after, and the match went on as planned. The message was clear. There were rules for the rest of the roster, and then there were Brock rules. He was too big to fail, too important to punish. The company had invested too much in him. They had sacrificed the streak, marginalized their roster, and now they were willing to overlook a public scandal to protect their asset. They were too far down the slope to turn back. For the next few years, the cycle continued. Lesnar would hold a championship, disappear, return for a massive payday, and either dominate or lose in a way that protected his mystique. He even won the Money in the Bank briefcase in 2019 without even being an official participant in the match, a creative decision so bizarre and convenient it felt like a parody. Brock Party, he called it, a boombox-carrying caricature of the monster he once was. It was a sign of the creative rot that had set in. When you have an ultimate weapon, the temptation is to use it to solve every problem, even when it makes no sense. And then, the slope gave way to an abyss. In January 2024, a lawsuit was filed by a former WWE employee, Janelle Grant, against Vince McMahon, another executive, and the WWE Corporation. The allegations were horrific, detailing claims of sexual assault, exploitation, and sex trafficking. Within the graphic details of the lawsuit was a particularly chilling passage. It alleged that in 2021, McMahon had offered Grant as a sexual pawn to secure the re-signing of a world-famous athlete and former UFC heavyweight champion. The lawsuit alleged that McMahon had directed Grant to create personalized sexual content for this unnamed star and had shared explicit photos and videos of her with him. It described a planned sexual encounter that was only derailed by a snowstorm. While Lesnar was not named as a defendant in the suit, the description was unmistakable. There was only one person on the planet who fit that description. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Brock Lesnar, who was reportedly scheduled for a surprise return at the 2024 Royal Rumble, was pulled from the event. His character was removed from the WWE 2K video game. His merchandise vanished from the company's online store. The man who had been the center of the WWE universe for a decade became Voldemort overnight, he who must not be named. This was the bottom of the slope. This was the unforeseen, horrifying cost of the deal made 10 years earlier. WWE had chosen to build their house on the foundation of one man. They gave him power, money, and a special set of rules. They made him an untouchable God King. They ignored warning signs and compromised principles to keep him happy and keep him as a draw. They had tethered their brand so inextricably to his that when he became radioactive, the entire company felt the heat. The story of Brock Lesnar's second run in WWE is a modern epic and a cautionary tale. It's a story of a once-in-a-generation athlete and a ruthless business that saw him as the ultimate asset. The decision to end the Undertaker's streak was not just a creative choice, it was a philosophical one. It signaled a shift away from building a company on a foundation of homegrown, loyal stars and toward a model of relying on a transcendent part-time attraction. For a decade, it paid dividends. Lesnar brought eyeballs, sold tickets, and gave the product an unmatched aura of danger. But the slope was always there, getting steeper with every special privilege, every absent championship reign, and every controversy that was swept under the rug. WWE chose to feed the beast, and the beast gave them exactly what they wanted, unparalleled dominance. But a beast, by its nature, is untamable, and a slope, by its nature, only leads downward. The silence that fell over the Superdome in 2014 was just a prelude. The deafening silence that now surrounds the name Brock Lesnar is the true chilling sound of a myth dying.